Welcome back to News X World. I'm Asuma Katauka and you're watching Focal Length, where we get your briefing on topics from across the world. Conflicts often dominate headlines through military and political lenses, but beyond the battlefields, women and children pay a disproportionate price. Since the October 7 attacks, questions of gender-based violence, accountability, and international silence have emerged as critical human rights concerns. Joining us today is Ms. Ayelet Razin Bet, an Israeli lawyer, women's rights activist, and advocate for the victims of October 7. She is a leading voice on gender justice, has worked with the United Nations, and currently leads initiatives such as the Dina Project and the Nitzan Fund for the Advancement of Women and Gender Equality. Thank you for joining us, Ms. Ayelet Razin Bet. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, my first question to you is, since October 7, how has the conversations around women's rights in conflict zones changed or failed to change on the global stage? What is your analysis?
Unfortunately, it hasn't changed at all, or I'll say if it has changed for the worse. The strong forces, the surprising strong forces of denial and minimalism of the gender-based violence that occurred on October 7th were striking to me, professionally and also I'll say personally. All my life, I have struggled for women and for women's rights all over the world, never mind where they're from, what their religion is, what their nationality is, and I truly believed that this sisterhood is, and this, this core belief of victims of sexual violence, especially in conflict-related, in conflict areas, is something that is common knowledge. And when this happened on October 7th, and to Israelis, to Jewish women and men, I was amazed at the cold shoulder, the disbelief to the victims, to the stories, to the testimonies, and it was devastating, professionally and personally, like I said.
Thank you for highlighting that, Ms. Orr. And now moving to my second question, how has October 7 reshaped women's activism and feminist discourse within Israel and in the Jewish diaspora worldwide?
So, like I said, this disbelief was shocking to us. There's this mantra, "Me too, unless you're a Jew," which unfortunately is not only a mantra; it was our reality. But we don't have the privilege to give up or to not tell our truth and not tell what happened to us and to our people. And we've been working very, very hard to collect, literally from October 7th, I myself have been working to collect testimonies and evidence and footage and all pieces and shreds of information about what happened in that respect and that perspective of the sexual violence, and we were able to prove to the world through international reports and UN agencies and professionals from academia or the UK Parliament committee. There's a long line of international reports that recognize the sexual violence, recognize the victims, and the demand of accountability and action to take action against the perpetrators. And just on August 2025, 2 years too late, Hamas was put on the blacklist of organizations suspected of committing sexual violence as a weapon of war. So we do have achievements in the international and legal arena. But again, like I said at the beginning, there are very strong forces that are working to deny and to minimalize, or this is also something that's very frustrating, is the balancing, that in the name of the politically correct, saying, okay, maybe this happened to you, but you are also committing institutionalized sexual violence, which is very, very frustrating in this line of work, which I would think would be only professional
Yes. Thank you for
and
highlighting that.
non-politicized.
Thank you for highlighting that, Ms. Or. And you lead the DINA project, documenting gender-based violence from October 7 and during captivity. Why is formal documentation so critical for justice and historical truth?
I'll just correct, I'm a co-founder of the DINA project. I'm a former member, but I still am working on collecting the evidence, testimonies, and all footage. And as I hope you know, there are more and more hostages that came back from captivity who are now prepared in sharing their experience in captive, and also share very violent descriptions of all sorts of violence, but also sexual violence. And we recognize and strengthen them in their courageous struggle for the truth. Why it is so important to document? I'll say this. I have never, in all my years of work in this field, I call myself a professional feminist, but also as a legal expert, I have never seen such a denial to acts of sexual violence and to victims demanding this recognition. You know, nobody doubted the Ukrainian women as to what happened to them by Russian authorities. Nobody questioned the Yazidi women when they told what happened to them by the terrorist forces. But when it came to Israel, it came to, unfortunately, our front line, and civilians were victims to this horrific terror attack and the atrocities in many different ways, and also sexual violence. Suddenly, there's this demand for the golden evidence. Where are the victims? Show us the testimonies. You know, it's never enough. And there are more and more and more evidence that we're collecting very sensitively and very, piece by piece, collecting this puzzle to understand what happened. And the picture is clear. The terrorist organizations use sexual violence as a weapon of war, as we see all over the world in battlefields. And since the days of the Bible, we call the project the DINA project because of Dinah, the biblical character of Jacob and Leah, who was abducted and raped. Since the days of the Bible, women's bodies have been part of the battlefield. But when it happens to Israelis, it happens to Jewish women, suddenly there's all these question marks. So when we're in this loop in collecting more and more because we're not believed, and it is, again, like I said, very frustrating professionally when colleagues who are feminists, who are professionals, who, you know, we believe, suddenly there's this extra level of proof that you need to bring. But there is proof to the patterns, to the methods. And we'll keep struggling. We don't have the privilege to, you know, give up on this. It's too important.
You're so brave, Ms. R. And from your experience working with the United Nations, where do international legal frameworks succeed and where do they fail when it comes to prosecuting sexual violence in the conflict zones?
It's a complicated question because each you know, there's different legal systems to each country. One of the problems here in Israel is that it was a battle zone, a battlefield. It was not treated as a crime scene. Rape kits were not taken The footage that we have was taken, either we take them from the GoPros of the first responders, or even from the terrorist GoPros that were found, or first responders who took pictures, but it was not treated as a crime scene. So that's a very, very big challenge. And there were masses of victims and bodies that by Jewish law, you have to bury as quickly as possible. So the bodies were identified and were sent to burial. And so there's this, if you want to go through, it's not like a regular legal process. But having said that, there are victims who came forward and told their stories, and there is evidence, there is footage, and as far as I understand, the prosecution in Israel is getting ready to indict the terrorists who are held in the prison authority. But it's a difference than other places in many different ways, but also because the war was still going on for more than 2 years. So it was very difficult to collect, to also process the trauma, and to bring victims to come forward and testify, and also witnesses that were also victims, maybe not to sexual assault, but they were eyewitnesses to these acts, and had many levels of trauma to overcome to come forward. So there are a lot of challenges in prosecuting these kinds of cases. I know that the UN, as a professional organization, does support countries in these procedures, like Ukraine, I think also Colombia, and there's great achievements. In Israel, it is, I guess, still being sorted out. Israel has its challenges with the UN, a lot of mistrust, I have to say, with some of the agencies. So it's a bit more challenging in that sense.
Thank you for sharing that. And Ms. Or, what responsibilities do media, legal institutions, and civil society have in ensuring that crimes against women are neither denied nor erased?
That is such an important question. Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you.
Because if we want victims to come forward and share their testimony, take a little bit of the burden on their heart, and trust enough to share their experiences, it is our responsibility as society, with all organs, also the media, also the state authorities. It is our responsibility to create the climate that will allow them to feel enough trust, and that they are safe and guarded to share their story, and that it will be accepted with respect, and will also maybe initiate action to get them better rehabilitation, or take actions against the perpetrators. And that's our responsibility as society. And I was very, very relieved, I'll say, to see that there are more and more hostages that came back from Gaza captivity who feel like they have this space, this climate, that they can share their story, and that society, the Israeli society, will accept it with respect and sensitivity, part in a way that the world is now on some kind of test, because I know I am in touch with many of the received hostages, that the reason they came forward and told their story is because they are looking for the recognition of the world, of the society, the international society. They want the world to know what the enemy looks like, what kind of brutal, violent inhumane treatment they were given and were held in for 2 years. So they're looking to the world for that recognition and respect, and in some places it did, get the proper response. But it's a bit too little, too late. But if I take it out from a wider focal point, it is an important question, because we all have to check ourselves what response, trauma-informed response, we can give to victims who decide to share their story. And it's our responsibility to bear witness with them.
Yes, 100%. Thank you for highlighting that, Ms. Or. And looking ahead, what concrete steps must the international community take to ensure that sexual violence in conflict is recognized, prosecuted, and never normalized anywhere in the world?
So I'll say that our unfortunate experience as Israelis is not only an Israeli experience. It reflects to other places in the world, because when victims see that there is a group of people or a group of religion that is not believed, and that UN experts feel free to say, we do not believe victims, there's not enough evidence for believing, then it has a ripple effect. It reflects other victims around the world. They ask, and I get this a lot. I travel around the world and share the evidence and tell the story of October 7th, and I get these questions. Who else is not going to be believed? Who else is not trustworthy? Their story, it's not enough that they say, this happened to me. So there's a very, very big breach of the trust in the how UN agencies are looked at, because it's a non-professional, very political conduct. There are some that have been brave and trustworthy and committed to their position, and did recognize the evidence and wrote the truth as it is. But many of the institutions failed, unfortunately. So what I would say, to answer in a more practical way to your question, is there needs to be a protocol, an internationally accepted protocol on as a guidance to institutions, the state institutions, as to how to treat these kind of situations, trauma-informed treatment, mental health, physical health, how to do the forensics examinations, to even hold this in mind, that this sometimes and many times is part of what happens, is sexual violence. An internationally recognized protocol that lays out the emergency protocol in these situations can be very, very helpful. And also a call out for the accountability to perpetrators. If the perpetrators, are recognized as heroes or freedom fighters, and the blame is turned around, what kind of credibility do you have as a professional institute, international institute? So there's a lot of trust to be built back before practical measures can be taken, I think.
Very enlightening. We truly appreciate your participation today, Ms. Ayelet Razin Bet Or. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for giving.
Thank you very much for joining us, Ms. Or, and sharing your insights on focal length. With that, it's a wrap on this episode of The Focal Length. For more international news and updates, stay tuned on News 6 World.